Welcome to the November 29th, 2023 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. We want to welcome those of you who are with us at the old courthouse and those of you who are joining us online. Some of you may be here to provide public comment. The Board of Douglas County Commissioners welcomes public comment and thanks you in advance for following these procedures. Each action item on the agenda will offer an opportunity for relevant public comment about that topic. We ask that you wait until the agenda item you're here for comes up for discussion. Comments related to agenda items are welcomed after the board has had an opportunity to discuss that topic. The Board of County Commissioners will invite comments on topics not included in the agenda during our general public comment session. That's directly after considering the consent agenda. This is a time for addressing issues not on today's agenda, but related to the general business of the County Commission. We'll first call on folks who are here in person, and then we'll turn to any online commenters who are here with us tonight. If you're on Zoom, please plan to use the raise your hand function when the time comes and listen for staff to call your name. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask everyone to give their full name and Douglas County residence for our meeting minutes. All public comments should be directed to the County Commission. Campaigning for public office is not allowed. We also reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker who is vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The public should know that the comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not represent the views of Douglas County government. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share their screen. Please know that online participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet during tonight's meetings. Materials are published online for your reference as well. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on our YouTube page and website. We'll start tonight with our consent agenda. We have 7 items on our consent agenda, and then we'll turn to general public comment. We have 2 items on our regular agenda. One is a home rule resolution regulating open burning for the unincorporated area, and we had a work session on that prior to our meeting. And then the second item is an update on the 3-year performance and impact analysis from Artists Helping the Homeless. Then we'll do appointments, Commissioner Administrator Miscellaneous before we adjourn. With that, we'll turn to the consent agenda. Commissioners, do either of you have an item from the consent agenda you'd like to have pulled for further discussion? No? Anyone in the public like to pull an item from the consent agenda for further discussion? Online, Jill? Okay, with that, Commissioners, I'd take a motion on the consent agenda.
Commissioner Reed, I move to approve items 1.1 through 1.7.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0. We'll move on to general public comment. Is anyone here at the courthouse who would like to provide general public comment? Anyone online, Jill? Okay, we'll close general public comment and move to our regular agenda, and it will start with emergency management, a home rule resolution regarding open burning for the unincorporated of Douglas County, Kansas. And our Director of Emergency Management, Robert Bernecki, is here. Hi, Robert.
Good evening. I'm Robert Benecki with, I guess I know everybody here, Douglas County Emergency Management. This is Jillian Rodrigue. We work together in emergency management. So before you, we've presented a home rule resolution update or revision to a resolution that was initially drafted in 2015, revised in 2017, and we're revising it again. With this revision, we're creating a county policy, and the idea would be that the county policy would be the one place that anybody that needed to burn or wanted information about burning in the county and unincorporated areas would have a place for all that information to be. So that's the purpose of creating that policy. When it comes to the criteria for burn, that hasn't changed. Not really much has changed. There's been a lot of reorganization in the resolution. We worked with a team over the last year, including our staff and emergency management, the Fire Chiefs Association, ECC Communications, GIS, IT, District Attorney's Office, and Zoning and Code. So those are the people that were involved in helping us come to where we are today with this resolution. We did answer a few questions during the work session. If you've had some time to think more about it, if you have any other questions, we stand to take those.
Thanks, Robert. I know part of the reason for this is some violations we've had of our rules, and there is part of this talks about enforcement and penalties. Can you just go over for the public in a little more specificity what the plans are for that?
Sure, thanks. So So the process for enforcement hasn't changed. I mean, it's still a misdemeanor if convicted, charged, but basically it's two things. One is if you violate anything in the resolution or in the code, you could be charged with a misdemeanor. The second would be is if there is a burn ban in effect, then you violate the conditions of that burn ban, you could also be charged. And so whether it's a fire official or a law enforcement official, they can take that information to the district attorney's office, who has told us that there would, in fact, take these charges seriously and enforce it. So that's really the basic process of it. But I will tell you that with the new resolution, the new policy, there's going to be a significant campaign for education and directly from fire chiefs in the field, as well as media, social media. We really want to get people aware and informed about the process.
Can you also cover for the public, like what kinds of burning are allowed under this policy? So we still have agricultural burning, we still have recreational, and like household waste also can still be burned. What then does the penalty apply to? If you can just talk to that for people who might be listening.
I'll let you come on up and talk.
So part of what we did in the resolution was clarify each of those, as you just mentioned, what you can and can't burn. We did take agricultural, and it's its own section now. The rules are slightly different. It follows the KAR very closely. Any of those violations would still fall underneath the two misdemeanor options for either charging based upon not following the rules just for overall burning, or if you're burning during a burn ban. So we just spent the time to try to reduce the number of questions that individuals have as they want to burn, to make sure that they're doing the right things. And in the resolution rewrite, it's really an opportunity to try to help them understand better so that we can have safe burning practices and reduce the number of incidents that our responders respond to.
And you mentioned already that there's an educational component that comes with this. So folks not knowing the rules the first time, they'll get a conversation about that, possibly a follow-up conversation, but it's just to kind of catch folks who are repeatedly not following the rules. Would that be correct?
Correct. And there will be, as Robert mentioned, we really want to make sure the information goes out far and wide as we see these just general changes and making sure that folks understand what the rules are. We get to know a majority of folks want to do the right thing in the right place and do it safely. And so we just want to make sure they have that information. But the chiefs have made intent to make sure that there is that education piece as they interact with folks. But if we do have those repeat offenders, that we can make sure to address that quickly in appropriate ways where people can plan for that and what it'll look like.
For our listening public, can you cover what is the right thing to do, like the first step if someone has an interest in burning in the unincorporated area?
So the great thing is there is a burn hotline. It's updated by 8 a.m. every morning by emergency management staff. So individuals can call that burn hotline. It'll tell them they can burn or they can't burn. If you can burn, you'll press 0 and you get transferred over to the Douglas County Emergency Communication Center or Dispatch Center. They will then ask you what your name is, where you are, where you're burning, what you're burning, the type of burn. And again, if you're not exactly certain, they'll be able to help walk you through that of what it is so they can clarify that, how long you think that burn will happen. And then they're going to ask individuals to call back when the burn is done. And that way they know when a burn is finished, or if it's still burning, if we need to go and check on that. But that's going to be the big thing. There is a process that will be opening, hopefully at the beginning of the year, for an online process to do that exact same thing. So one notification you can either call, or when the form is online, you can submit the form online, and that constitutes the notification to the communication center that you're burning, and we make sure to have that on file. Yes. The other piece, he whispers in my ear. The other piece that we're going to be opening up closer to the beginning of year as well, a number of folks are using the call notification system, the Northeast Kansas Regional Notification System. A lot of folks are getting severe weather notifications for that. We will be opening that up for them to sign up to receive burn ban notifications. And so it'll go directly to their phone. So if we issue a burn ban at 7 a.m., it's going to hit their phone and they know. So that maybe cuts down on some of the calls and them trying to figure out whether or not they can burn that day. So that'll be coming as well as another tool to help inform individuals the morning of, or if we have to make a change during the day. It happens very rarely, but sometimes conditions change or there becomes so many fires, our resources become limited in the fire districts. And so we need to stop burning for that day to make sure that we can cover what we need to. So if we do that, that also allows people to get that direct notification quickly so that they can work to put out that fire because it becomes more dangerous at that point. Thank you.
And the cost to the homeowner or landowner or occupant, if there is a fire response in the rural area, can you cover that?
At this point, there is not a cost. So a number of the fire districts are volunteer. And even with the ones that are paid by the county, and I think they would agree, if that fire starts to get too large and starts to get unwieldy, go ahead and call. They would much rather come out early and get it stopped before it becomes a major issue than waiting to try to put that fire out yourself. So they will come, and that is a service that's provided to the county.
Thank you. I just want to take the opportunity for people to hear that. So earlier in the work session, I flagged, I think, just really two things that we talked about. Do those need to be changed for the language that we look at tonight, or does anything need to come back? And it was really just about whether that woodland or ecological burning is allowed specifically in here. And the other was fire departments starting back burns as a fire control measure, even during a burn ban.
No, we won't. We'll include those into the policy, the Douglas County policy. But there was a language change prior to today's meeting that we would ask that you would include that language and the revision.
And is that available to the public?
Robin, I believe she put it out to the public on the site. So, yeah.
This is Commissioner Reed. I do believe Robin said she updated the public agenda earlier, and I'm seeing a positive head nod from Commissioner Kelly, who's looking at his computer.
Okay, thank you.
We started to go down enforcement, and we've talked a lot about education, and I want to make sure that the public understands that even the enforcement is part of the education there, right? That if they unknowingly violate this, that they don't immediately get a ticket, that it's sort of well, you guys explain it. We heard about it in the work session, but in case nobody heard it in the work session.
So, yeah, so initially, for that particular case where somebody doesn't know they're violating, they would get a warning and they would have a conversation teaching about one idea that we have in this media or this education campaign is to create some kind of a card or a handout that the fire districts can hand out to people in the field and have that information to tell them exactly how and when and where to go. So, so when it comes to enforcement, it will be in education, it's going to be a huge campaign. I just lost my train of thought. Jillian, can you help me? Did I answer the question?
I usually catch you.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll ask can you ask the question again?
Yeah, so we were talking about that the enforcement is as much as an education campaign, and that there are 3 steps to actually we can go straight to a citation if necessary, but there are steps on the way to that.
So basically a conversation, then a warning, and then a citation. I think that's what you're getting to, Commissioner Kelly. Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Jillian. We'll open it up for public comment. Would anybody like to provide public comment on this item?
I'm Dawson here in Lawrence. I was looking through the policies that you guys listed online, and maybe I missed it, but it looked like if you want to do a campfire, you have to get a burn permit for that as well. I don't know a single person who wants to call in or go on an app for a campfire. A lot of times myself too, and people I know, all of a sudden we don't want to go roast marshmallows outside. So we are going to take the time to get the appropriate measures. We aren't going to want to do that. We're going to go in there and do our stuff, put it out, leave. I get for pastures and brush fires. I've done that growing up. That's important for the fire department to know where you're at in case it does get out of hand. I've had that happen. But I mean, maybe if I'm wrong, but I don't see a point or the necessity for that. If I'm wrong, please correct me, but just want to throw that out there.
Any other public comment here at the courthouse?
Good evening, Commissioners. Jim Carpenter. Tonight I'm here as Senior Assistant District Attorney. I worked with Bob and Jillian over the last year on drafting the burn ban. And that was after the District Attorney, Suzanne Valdez, was approached and saw the need to actively enforce this ordinance, but we had to figure out how that would come to us and what we would do with it. So I believe what is in the ordinance now with the multi-levels of education and warning, even when we get to a citation, it's not going to just turn into punishment. It will end up coming to refer to the district's attorney's office. It will be charged at the appropriate misdemeanor level, whether it happened during a burn ban or not during a burn ban. And then most likely, since this will be newly enforced, every single person will be diversion eligible. So I imagine everyone will apply for a diversion, which means it'll land on my desk for misdemeanor diversions. And we have a lot of tools at that time to continue with the educational component, because this will have a court cost, but I don't think any fines are established for this. So the result would be a court order for community service or restorative justice or some other component to get across the message and hopefully get people out in the county that get caught up in this system to be able to educate their neighbors just about why this is in place and why it's important to have this in place. So I'm here and can answer any other questions about what our process would be if you get to that.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for being here. Any other public comment? Checking online. Okay. We'll close public comment and bring it back up here.
Jillian, did you want to address Dawson's concern about the campfires? So I think it is addressed in here. I just want to have you say it instead of me.
So as far as the campfires, the only thing we ask is that an individual that's going to burn something over 5 feet in diameter, that those be called in. Other campfires underneath that don't require any additional notifications. Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments, motions, further
Just
questions?
want to thank the team that worked on this. I know there was a year plus that went into it and a lot of partners, the district attorney's office, the Chiefs Association, emergency communication, emergency management, possibly sheriff's office. Not sure if I haven't heard there. But there were a lot of voices in this to bring us a great policy. So thanks for the work on all of that. Give us some tools.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is it's important to remember why this policy is in place in the first place, is to protect the health and safety of our community. And sometimes we do have to have home rule regulations to make sure that we're protecting that safety and the safety of our firefighters as well who are responding. And we've seen an uptick in those fires, and it's really put a stress on communities' resources to be able to respond to those. So appreciate all the work, and I just want to make sure people understand why we're having this discussion at all.
Excellent opportunity to volunteer for your local fire department if you happen to live in the unincorporated area or even near an unincorporated area. So we are always looking for new volunteers, and I would just reach that out to anybody. Thanks.
Commissioner Willie, as the volunteer firefighter on this commission, would you be interested in making the motion on this?
Only if I can find it in time. I move to approve the home rule resolution regulating open burning for the unincorporated areas of Douglas County, Kansas, and incorporating the new language that was added today.
Second?
Jill, does that give you we have a little bit different recommendation on the motion that is very specific on,
I can pull that up also.
I don't know if that may be fine, Commissioner Willett. I just wanted to check.
I can read what I see on the agenda online, if that's helpful. Or have you been able to pull it up, Commissioner Willow?
I've just pulled it up and I can try again. So I move to approve the home rule resolution HR-23-11-4 with newly revised language per legal counsel, amending the Douglas County Code by enacting the new Chapter 6 Fire Safety, Article 1, Open Burning.
Second?
We're going to assume that was amended and the amendment was seconded, right? Okay,
Yes.
good, excellent. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes 3-0. Thank you all, appreciate all your work on that. We'll next move to an update from Artists Helping the Homeless, a 3-year performance and impact analysis. And I see Bob Triansky is here.
It's going to be mostly Matt, but I'm going to
Okay.
tee us off.
Excellent.
And Bob will probably provide some color commentary. And
Oh, there's Matt, I'm sorry.
I'd stay right there for now, and then we'll have you up in a minute. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Matt, I didn't expect to see you there. Okay, so that's fine, yes.
Yeah, and we'll have, I'll let the folks that are, we'll introduce folks here in just a minute. I'm going to just tee us up real quick. I provided you all with a nice background memo on just kind of a reminder of our relationship with Artists Helping the Homeless, the history of that, the services that they provide and how they provide them. And you'll hear more about that in the presentation that you'll hear from Matt, and some highlights from Dustin Moore that's here tonight from Artists Helping the Homeless. And of course, we have Car Wu that's with us as well. The purpose of tonight's presentation and the report that you were provided with has been a goal of the project team for a good amount of time. We entered into the partnership with Artists Helping the Homeless on a hunch that this could impact our jail population, but in particular impact our jail population for a group of folks that, largely a lot of these conversations came out of the Stepping Up initiative that Bob's been a huge part of, understanding how much of that jail population is driven by some of those social determinants of health, underlying needs of chronic health conditions, of mental illness, substance use disorder, and how that relates to housing. So the analysis work that's been done, it's been a team-based approach with Dr. Matt Cravens, Carrie Nice with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, who I don't think is able to join us tonight, unfortunately, but she's put a lot of time and effort into this. And of course, we've got Dustin that's here and Car Wu that have been a part of this, and they'll be providing some comments in between. But I'm going to hand it off to Matt to share the analysis piece.
And does this work if I use?
Oh, yeah, no, sorry.
Oh,
Great. No worries.
right. Let me just see if I can do presenter view. Yeah, that didn't work though. Let me just try. You know what? I'll just use these notes. Yeah. Can everyone hear me okay now? Okay, great. All right, so this presentation is just going to cover the main conclusions from the report that was in the packet. Previously, the commission and others asked for some data on Artists Helping the Homeless. We were able to get that data thanks to the program staff and also the reentry office. And so this presentation is going to focus largely on the quantitative analyses, but it'll also include some qualitative information from Dustin and others. But before starting, I just want to say that this is important to note that a lot of people contributed data and other things to this. So Carrie Neese from the reentry program, she helped with the data, a lot of important direction. Dustin Moore, community manager of Douglas County AHH, provided data and help. Carl Wu from AHH. Also, Ed Lobdell provided DECA data. And I need to give a quick shout out to the Burnt Nash folks. Amy Finkeldye and Brad Boyson also provided helpful data, and several others contributed comments and feedback. So we want to provide a little background first on AHH. I know you all know most of it, but we just have a couple slides, and so I'm going to invite Dustin and AHH folks to start us off.
Okay, yeah, good evening. So my name is Dustin Moore. I'm the community manager for RS Helping the Homeless. Just a real quick background on what we do. We operate 2 houses here in Lawrence. The first one is our Kairos house, which is our First Step house. The majority of our clients that come there are directly out of Douglas County Jail and are referred by reentry. The biggest difference in our program and many other programs is that we don't charge for rent, we don't charge for clothing, food, anything. We allow guys the time to sit down and analyze their own life, and instead of having to jump into the very first job they find because they have to pay rent somewhere, we allow them to sit down and find what they're passionate about, find a purpose, so that when they leave us, they can continue to thrive in their life. So like I said, no rent is charged. We provided full wraparound services, so transportation is provided to everything they do, all their judicial requirements, work, Burnt Nash, anything they need to do, we provide transportation. We are completely peer support driven, so I am someone with lived experience. Everyone that works for us has lived experience, but we're not just peer support driven, we're also products of the program. So I can sit down and tell these guys that I know this program works because I'm standing right here in front of you, and I'm proof that this works. So if you give it the time and put in the effort, it does work. Like I said, everyone that worked here was residents at one point. And I think, like I said, that the biggest thing of it is the ability to sit down for the first 30 days. We put you on restriction your first 30 days. Because when you get out of jail, you don't have a birth certificate, a social security card, or an ID. The majority of people don't. And if I'm expected to go out and find employment and to pay my rent, it's not possible. You can't get a job. So the ability to allow them to sit down, and we help them get their ID. We help with a gap in medication. If there's a gap between getting out of jail and needing medication, and before we can get them signed up with Burnt Nash, we'll provide medication. We provide dental work. And everything in there is individual based. So what works for one person isn't going to work for the next. So we sit down and analyze with that person and ask them, what do you want to do? If they don't have their GED, let's get your GED, because I want you, when you leave us, to be able to thrive and not just go back into a mode of survival. So that's just a real basic background of how we work.
Great, and there's a little bit more information here on the second slide too. I think it's really important to note about the wraparound services AHH provides. So transportation is sort of a vital service that a lot of people don't think about, but it's really important to get to appointments, whether that be legal, medical, otherwise. And there's a couple pictures, Meraki House, Kairos House, and one of the AHH vans. And I don't think we have anyone from reentry here tonight, but just a quick background on reentry. The Sheriff's Office reentry program is the largest source of referrals. So a lot of folks are either coming from the jail or directly referred from reentry, or sometimes the reentry program will give the contact information of AHH to the individual as they're leaving jail, and then they'll contact AHH themselves. But there's a process that happens after a referral is received. A reentry case manager will determine whether the inmate needs to stay or whether they intend to stay in Douglas County after a release, the individual's motivation to engage with the requirements of AHH, like sobriety, and the timeline of release. They do an in-custody interview with the potential client, and Dustin plays a key role in that. And then AHH and reentry have also worked together lately to incorporate AHH peers into jail programming, including Smart Recovery, decision points, and a 12-step recovery group. All right, so now we turn to the data. This slide is going to show you the number of AHH stays by year. So there were 145 stays in the first 4 calendar years of the program in Douglas County. That includes 123 stays at Kairos House only, and then another 22 stays that started at Kairos House and transitioned to Meraki House. So Meraki opened in 2021, Kairos opened in 2019 in October. The remainder of this report is just going to cover the first 3 calendar years of AHH stays, so 2019, 20, and 21. This is because we need a sufficient amount of time after AHH exit to observe recidivism and service utilization outcomes. And at the time this analysis started, it wasn't too far after 2022, so we don't include 2022. There were 90 stays in the first 3 years that will be included in the analysis. Oh, go
I have
ahead.
a quick question. So I remember right in the report, you just said the number again, 145 stays. And you mentioned in the report that those stays, there are sometimes multiple stays for a unique individual who may have left and come back for one reason or another. Do you know how many unique individuals there have been?
Yes, in the first 3 calendar years, I believe there were 6 individuals with repeat stays. So,
Oh, okay. So not a significant number of that. I was just trying to like, how does 145 stays compared to, I just wondered how, I suppose, negligible the difference in numbers or like how common multiple stays for a unique individual might be, but it sounds like fewer than 10.
Justin may be able to speak to this. I'll just say, when I look at their monthly reports, it's a rare occurrence that somebody leaves and comes back. But Dustin, go ahead.
Well, and I assume even, I just want to mention, like, I did figure it was somewhat rare anyway, but like the qualitative examples in the report of somebody who went and served a sentence out, right, in another county jail and then came back. I assume that an example like that might be counted as 2 stays because there was an exit from the house and a re-entry to the house.
Correct.
But anyway, I was just curious, like, how much lower is the number of unique individuals served over that same amount of time versus stays?
It's not a very significant amount. We may have a couple, like you said, if they have to go serve a sentence at a county jail, or if they leave for treatment and then return to us. But I mean, off the top of my head, this year, maybe 2 or 3. And so that's pretty average throughout the time.
And I think that speaks to the referral process. The reentry team does a great job of identifying candidates, and then ultimately AHH comes in and does and screens for referrals as well. So I really do think that they do a great job of identifying folks that are ready.
Yeah, and a big part of that is like he talked about at the end of the reentry part is it's us getting into the jail and going to the smart recovery classes and the decision points. That's my first chance to go and sit and meet with these guys and get a sense of what they're about. Because some people will use us as a chance to just get out of jail. But when I get to sit with them for an hour every week, you get a real sense of what they're trying to do. You get to know them a little bit better. And that's been a big help in our acceptance process.
And this slide right here shows the days in Kairos House. Oh, sorry, Dustin. The median number of days in Kairos House is 59, so just short of 2 months. About 70% of stays are 30 days or longer. A small number of people did transition from Kairos to Meraki House, and their days aren't captured in this figure, but those were all mostly longer-term clients. For most analyses, the clients staying 0 to 29 days are shown separately. A lot of these clients are still sort of getting their feet on the ground, acquiring IDs, phones, and typically have a little bit less buy-in to the program and a little bit less progress. As you'll see, they tend to have worse outcomes. So we're showing those 0 to 29 day people separately from the people who stay at least a month. So there were 2 analytical approaches that we used here. The recidivism analysis does a calculation of pre-AHH days and post-AHH jail days and jail bookings. So we wanted to basically see if AHH clients experience fewer jail bookings and jail days after they started in AHH and then after they exited compared to the years before AHH. And then we contrast that with two control groups. The service utilization analysis is pretty similar to that. We calculate pre-AHH and post-AHH services per year in a number of service categories. So you can see here we do ambulance transports, LMH ED visits, suicide, alcohol, and overdose related emergency services, Johnson, Douglas County Jail stays and days, Burton Nash intakes, and DECA services. And the idea is if we observe a statistically significant change in service utilization or jail bookings from pre to post, controlled, even in comparison to the control group, we can say HH sort of exerted a positive effect on its clients.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Go back to the other slide there. So in terms of Burton Nash and DECA services, some of those services could be and should be long-term and part of a recovery process. Is that different from counting like a unique event or something that would count in terms of service analysis?
Yeah, if I'm understanding your question right, one way the Burton Nash data get at what you're saying is we just look at intakes only and not number of services. So a person can have a whole lot of different services, but we are looking at sort of the number of intakes, sort of the initiation of services after a lapse or at the very start of treatment, either before HH or after HH.
Great, thank you.
So there are 6 years of Douglas County jail data attached to each client's record. The average pre-AHH period is 4.1 years, and the average post-AHH period is 1.8 years. All analyses use counts of jail days and jail stays per year to account for the fact that each person's pre-period is longer than his post-period. So here's an example to just show how this calculation works. For an example, individual in the pre-AHH period, this person has 6 bookings. Divided by 4.1 years gives you about 1.5 bookings per year and about 146 days per year. In the post-AHH period, this person had 1 jail booking and 0.02 days divided by 2 years gives you half of a booking per year and 0.01 days per year. So it's important to use control groups for a couple reasons. The first reason is COVID. Now, COVID created a lot of difficulties in data analysis for people all across the nation and all sorts of program analyses. But it certainly did with this too, because COVID occurred during the post period for most AHH clients, and jail stays were less common all throughout the county during COVID, but slightly longer on average for the individuals who did have a jail stay. So COVID-related declines in bookings shouldn't be attributed to AHH. A control group is also important due to regression to the mean. So studies of high utilizers and familiar faces increasingly find that those individuals' service utilization, like hospital admissions, will increase during difficult periods, but that those periods don't last indefinitely. Sometimes sort of difficult periods ease off, and someone with a lot of jail bookings or a lot of hospital admissions will sort of regress towards their mean. And so without a control group, it might look like, in the absence of a control group, like, oh, everyone's doing great, they're getting better. But a control group would also perhaps get better too. So you want to use that control group to kind of compare. And then this analysis for the jail uses 2 control groups. The first is randomly selected individuals in the jail during the same years as AHH stays, and then randomly selected acutely homeless individuals in the jail. So what I did here is I just randomly selected people in the jail to match the distributions of AHH stay years. So 13% of the samples in 2019, 24% in 2020, and 62% in 2021. And that's the same with the jail stays and the HH group. All right. Any questions before we move on? And one thing to note about the acutely homeless group is this group is anyone who entered the jail and told the booking officer that their address was the DARE Center, the shelter, or the jail, or just listed no address. And the thing is, most people do have an address to list of a family member or friend. So if you have absolutely no address to list or you're listing the DARE Center, you're you're much more acutely homeless is what we're calling those individuals. So it does make a sort of a good control group, but a little bit more of a high-risk control group to compare to the AHH population. All right, so this figure is showing average number of jail bookings per year. We see that the group staying 30 days or longer in AHH did have a statistically significant decline over time. The AHH 0 to 29 days group did not. And here we tee up the control group. So the control group, kind of consistent with the explanation of COVID, did have a decrease in jail bookings over time. That was also statistically significant. The homeless control group did not. So I think this represents tentative evidence that there is a recidivism reducing effect when you compare to the homeless control group, but it does sort of suggest that we want to evaluate some additional measures. And one of the best measures is jail days. So, you know, a person can have one jail booking that's 360 days or one jail booking that's like a couple hours. You know, that first one is going to reflect much more sort of serious criminal activity, a much bigger impact in a lot of ways. So it's really useful to use jail days as an alternate measure. And here we see that the AHH 30 plus days group did have a big 19-day decline in the average jail bookings days, between the pre and the post period. And then all the other groups actually had a slight increase in days. And so that increase in the control group days of 8.2 to 8.7 is consistent with what we're seeing with COVID, with the slight increase in the length of stay for individuals at the start of COVID. And so I think we can really say here that this is a substantial decrease in recidivism. And, you know, this is just a number, but I think for the individuals experiencing this is very meaningful. And there are a couple of different ways to look at this too. So we can look at medians. You know, with jail analyses, it's really common to use medians just because you'll have a few people with really long stays that just skew the average. And so it's really nice to look at sort of your typical stay with a median. You can't do statistical significance with this, but it does give you a different measure to kind of triangulate. And we did see that AHH 30 plus days group dropped in their median by 19 days. That was very large. It mirrors the other effect we saw. The AHH 0 to 29 days group did drop their median, but keep in mind, this is a really small group. It's 28 people, and about the same number of people actually had a decrease as compared to an increase in jail days from the pre to the post period. So we're not going to read into too much on this AHH 0 to 29 days group for this slide. The final method we want to use here is linear regression. So AHH clients are very different from the control groups with respect to gender and age. So AHH clients are all men, and they're also younger on average. So with linear regression models, we can see the effects of AHH while statistically controlling for these variables. And the only statistically significant effect we see here in these results is the decline in jail days for the AHH folks staying about a month or longer. So we see negative 20 days, which is really similar to the 19-day drop we saw before too. So this really confirms that our previous results are robust to the inclusion of demographic controls. And then I think all these jail results converge on the conclusion that people staying with AHH for a month or more experienced a substantial decline in criminal recidivism. This decline does appear to be the direct result of AHH. And those staying in Kairos House a short amount of time, less than 30 days, didn't really experience that reduced recidivism. I think, again, the quantitative results are what we're focusing on here, but I think what you can really say is for a person to experience 19 days less jail a year is really transformative. And I think that's significant, especially seeing that median drop to 0 is sort of a big effect. Any questions on the jail results before we move on?
Could you go back a couple slides to one more? Yeah, this one. I know we're just looking at data and we're maybe not in the sense making yet, but it sort of strikes me that it looks like if you're there less than 29 days, the number of jail days goes up, right? I mean, I thought it might decrease, my thinking was it might decrease a little bit, but I didn't expect it to increase. And so maybe we want to wait here a little bit and have that discussion, but I'm interested to get some feedback from our partners on that.
Yeah, I think one thing that came out of the analysis is that this short-term group seems to struggle. I mean, they are a lot higher risk individuals when you look at the fact that they come in with a much higher number of jail days. So the pre-period is looking at the 4 years before they even, had contact with HH, and they had a lot of jail days before. So they're a little bit higher risk folks. I wouldn't read into the difference between 49.8 and 57 too much because, this is a small sample size. We're talking about 28 individuals. So, a little fluctuation here and there isn't statistically significant. But I think it is noteworthy that it doesn't change too much for those folks. So, and we'll tie this all together a little bit more at the end too. So this next figure describes intakes for mental health and psychiatric treatment at Burton Ash Center. Again, thank you to the Burton Ash folks for attaching the data to the sample. So intakes occur at the start of treatment. We talked about this a little bit, whether the individual is new to Burton Ash or following a lapse in treatment. So it provides a nice measure of the initiation of services. And what we see here is the percent of AHH clients with Burton Ash intakes increased by a factor of 2.5 from 17% in the pre-AHH period to 43% in the post-AHH period. And that difference is statistically significant. So there were 8 residents with intakes in the pre-period and 20 in the post-period. And I really think this suggests that AHH led to a large jump in the initiation of mental health and psychiatric services. So again, this sample size isn't huge, but it was statistically significant, which incorporates sample size calculations. So the service utilization analysis relies on MyRC data. So we attach MyRC data to each client's record. The sample sizes are a little smaller than for the recidivism analysis, just because the data was only available from February 2020 onwards, and to make the pre and post periods sufficiently long, HH stays starting in July 2020 are used. So we dropped down to about 42 individuals in the 30+ day group. And the one nice thing about the MyRC data is it includes Douglas County and Johnson County jail stays. So these are the results for the AHH 30+ days group. And, I don't want to spend too much time here because, we already saw jail results. It's not directly comparable to the previous results because this is a slightly different sample. So, we shouldn't read into it too much, but I think it's noteworthy that when we include Johnson County and Douglas County jail days, we see the same effect. So this pretty much validates what we saw before. We see a drop in bookings, a drop in jail days. They are large drops. Only the drop in bookings is statistically significant, but I actually suggest at a couple points folding in some additional years of data at some point. I think with another couple of years of data, we would see that jail days decline be statistically significant too. This is the number of ambulance runs per year. So again, we calculate per year service utilization just because that's more accurate when you have pre and post year periods that are different in length. We see a big decline. It isn't quite statistically significant, but this is very suggestive of an effect. LMH ED visits, the average did decline. I show the median here on the right-hand side. So this is, again, reflects more your typical person. The median didn't really change much. It was about 0.6 to 0.7 in the pre and the post period. I think, as I'll note later, this does suggest some unmet, health care needs. And this is a big decline. So what we were able to do is look at ICD-10 codes for the hospital discharge diagnoses in MyRC, and then also any ambulance impressions by the staff who mentioned suicide. So we could use this data to figure out if you had any ED visits or ambulance runs that mentioned either suicidal ideation or suicide attempt. And what we see here is a big decline, basically. So that's a positive sign. It's not statistically significant, but I think with another couple of years of data, we might see something that is, but that's a very promising effect. We also looked at alcohol-related ED visits and ambulance runs per year. That was a big drop. Again, the sample size is a little small, so we weren't able to detect any but sort of the strongest effects with this, and it didn't quite emerge as statistically significant, but there is a big effect there. I think that's quite suggestive. It seems to be having the right effect for this group. The drug overdose-related ED visits and ambulance runs, we didn't see any real change. It was really quite low in both the pre and the post periods. The results for the AHH 0 to 29 days group is a little bit different. The ambulance runs per year the average seemed to increase a little bit, but note that the median is both 0 in the pre and the post period. The LMH ED visit number actually did increase, and it was statistically significant. It increased from 2 to about 3.5 in the post period. That's a pretty large number. The median actually jumped to about 0.8, so I think this does seem to suggest some unmet behavioral health care needs in this group. But let's just finish up here with the rest of those results before we sort of tie it together. Suicidal ideation and attempt ED visits and ambulance runs per year, it did increase and was statistically significant. So this is a little bit worrisome for this group. And I think one stat that was in the report that you guys probably saw was, I think it was, let me quote the right number, I think it was about a third of the individuals in this sample had some sort of, event in the post period that either mentioned suicidal ideation or attempt. And so that's, that's a little bit worrisome. We don't see any statistically significant changes here in these figures related to alcohol or drug overdose. So I think the service utilization analyses would really be benefited by another couple additional years of data for the AHH 30+ days group. We're really seeing some positive signs. Again, the shorter term groups does seem to struggle a little bit, but there's only so much of a story you can tell with numbers. I'm a quantitative person, but I think it's really important to highlight some of the qualitative stories. And Dustin's going to come up and share some of these, a couple stories from AHH clients, which really sort of bring the numbers to life a little.
Yeah, so I'm not a quantitative person. I'm a people person, and that's why I love what I do. And I think it's important that Matt pointed out the transitional effect that we are having on these men's lives, and it's not just these men's lives; it's their families' lives, and it's the communities in general. I'm going to just start with myself. I've been a lifelong meth addict. Spent most of my 20s and 30s in jail. Ended up going to prison. I got the chance to come to AHH. And now I'm the community manager out there, and I didn't just find a job. I've now found a purpose. I found a reason to wake up every single morning and go to work and to continue to serve these people that stay with us. And more important than that, a little over a year and a half ago, I got married. My wife had a 2-year-old son whose dad has never been in his life, is living in that life. He's never been around. Before we got married, I made her that promise that he'll never know the feeling of not having a father in his life. In these coming months, I'm going to legally adopt him. And there's no equation, there's no way to measure the importance of the fact that a 2-year-old's never going to know the feeling of not having his dad in his life because I was there. I'm going to be there, And this one right here is a gentleman that was with us that I believe that the first, again, same story, lifelong criminal, heroin addict, fentanyl, all this stuff. Coming to us, he was facing 12 years in prison for a distribution of heroin charge. The judge let him out and basically said, you're going to be on pretrial. He was on an ankle monitor until his sentencing. He stayed with us for 3 months. He put the work in, got reunited with his wife. His own journey invoked a recovery journey in his wife. His wife is now over a year sober. Just this past year, so he was with us for 3 months. He moved on to an Oxford house. He continued the work. He's like a pillar in our recovery community in Lawrence. When he went to jail, the plea got brought down to 9 years at jail. His mom was there, his wife was there, and his kids were there. And then the judge said that because of the work that you've done in the AHH program and since you left, there's no need for me to send you to prison for 9 years. I'm going to give you a downward departure to probation. And so then to see the tears from his mom, from his wife, and from his kids, knowing that her son, her husband, and their father would not be going to prison and be absent in their life for another 9 years, he could be there as a beacon of hope and strength, not just in their family, But like I said, in the recovery community, he's still living in an Oxford house, and he's still preaching a message of recovery. The last one I'll go over is just a really good friend of mine. Again, kind of same story. He came to us, lifelong criminal, drug addict. Hadn't seen his parents and hadn't seen his dad in 12 years. And it was Thanksgiving time, and so his dad, he put in some work. He was with us for about 6 months. His dad came down from Tennessee to see him, not only to see him, but actually cooked Thanksgiving dinner for our entire program. And when his dad showed up after driving from Tennessee, and my friend came out and gave him they hugged for 5 minutes straight. They hadn't seen each other in 12 years. And the work that this gentleman had done at our program and the things that he was putting in his life allowed them to reunite. And again, you can't put a dollar amount on the significance of a father not being in a family's, or being in a family's life now for another 9 years instead of being in prison. You can't put a quantitative analysis on the strength of a hug between a father and a son who haven't seen each other for 12 years. And so I love these numbers. I'm glad that they turned out the way they did, because it's what I already knew. But yeah, I think the way to really create a change in the community, in the homeless population and the group of addicts that we serve, is by stories like these. And these are just a few of them. I have a countless number of them. I was told we have like 15 minutes, so I'm not going to tell any more. But these, like I said, these are just three of the many stories of people that, like I said, now have not only changed their life, changed their family's life, but now they are evidence that this is possible. Again, from lived experience, there was a time I thought I was going to be a drug addict the rest of my life. I didn't know there was another choice. I now know there's a choice, and I can speak to that to the people that I serve, and that's the same with all these guys too. So.
Thank you, Dustin. So, I think it's important to note that AHH does fill a large gap in the community. A lack of housing and related services for people exiting incarceration or waiting for an inpatient SUD treatment bed. So, as I mentioned in the report, I think even if these analyses didn't reveal any significant changes in recidivism, the program would still be clearly valuable. The benefits of AHH documented here should probably be considered sort of added benefits beyond the baseline advantages associated with providing housing and other needed services to these client population. I think, housing is very difficult for some individuals leaving incarceration, and this is an important a place where those folks can find that housing. So AHH stays of 30 plus days, as we note here in the second bullet, did appear to cause pretty substantial declines in jail days, an average of 19 days per year, and the median dropped to 0 days. So there were a few different ways that we tried to get at this, and I think we can be a little bit more confident in the conclusion because there were several triangulation methods here. But this translates to about 1,094 jail bed days averted in the first year for these individuals, and about 247,000 in jail costs averted, assuming about a $226 per bed day costs. And these savings would grow as more people transition through AHH. I think the benefits can also be measured in terms of less criminal victimization, less avoiding the immense social and economic costs of convictions and incarceration. As Dustin highlighted, these benefits radiate to family members too. And so, recidivism declines, help in dollars, but also help in sort of, life experiences being better. And that leads me to a point to, well, let me get to these before I get to that. So there were large increases in mental health treatment intakes for the long-term AHH residents, and I think that was significant. It sort of points to the fact that AHH seems to be connecting people to needed mental health treatment, so that's positive. We saw potentially fewer suicide and alcohol-related emergency services, so that was good. Again, I think replicating these analyses with another year of data would help for the service utilization stuff, but we are seeing some very strong suggestive effects. A couple additional conclusions and limitations. So HH residents staying less than a month do appear to struggle after exiting. The group didn't experience any statistically distinguishable changes in jail usage from pre to post HH period. They hadn't increased ED visits and suicide-related emergency services. as we discussed, in our own group, it's sometimes difficult to figure out a smooth transition plan for these folks if they do just want to leave. So, finding a way to help these people would be great, but it is sometimes difficult to help the folks who are leaving really quickly after just a week if they feel like they're not a good fit. So a couple things to note. A limitation of the analysis was the modest sample size. And then quantitative indicators aren't always available on all topics. I think if it were possible to get sort of life satisfaction measures, we would see big increases in that. I think if there were some mental health assessment numbers that we could sort of put on this, we would see big increases in that too. But, quantitative indicators can only capture so much. So a few recommendations that were in the report that you all saw. Continue to connect clients with primary care physicians in Heartland Community Health Center. So, I know that HH is already doing this, but just continuing to do this will really help so people don't feel like they have to rely on emergency services for basic health care. We did see a number of ED visits, even in the post period for the HH 30+ group and the HH 0 through 29 day group. So, there is some unmet need, and just continuing to connect these folks to physicians is good. Applying for Medicaid or CannCare coverage when possible would be good. So folks feel more sort of financially secure in the decision to see non-emergency providers would always help. And then continuing to connect clients with Burton Nash Center and DECA. It seems like that's happening, but just making sure that continues to happen. So that's all we had for the results. Open to any questions that folks have. And thank you very much for the time.
Commissioners, I wanted to just quickly say that this is, first of all, I'm really grateful for Matt's work on putting together the report and taking the time and energy to put it all together. It's really a tremendous effort on his part, and I hope it's an example of ways we can use his talents and analyze some future investments, some other investments that we have in programs. But I also, what I want to make sure that I highlight, because I continue to get questions and seeking clarity and conversations in the community around supportive housing. When you say supportive housing, what do you mean? What does that look like? This is not what a good amount of support. Supportive housing can look like a lot of different things. This is a higher level of supportive housing. As Sam Natale with Kansas Holistic Defenders, it says AHH is a great program, but it's not for everybody. And that's certainly true, but it is needed for a really unique population of folks that we didn't have a solution for or an option for up until our partnership with Artists Helping the Homeless. So it is one of the best examples we have of what supportive housing can look like, and the intersection of the behavioral health work that Bob does and the housing work that myself and some of my colleagues have been a part of on the community health plan. That intersection is really important in making sure that we have, we're mindful of the continuum. We're person-centered, like Dustin talked about, and we're thinking about how we're incorporating peers into that. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure I capped it out and we can answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Jill. Commissioners, questions?
I do have a question. I'm curious, and maybe this question can't be answered right now because we don't have anybody from reentry here, but, well, I guess it's two questions. One that, Karwu or Dustin should be able to answer. I know that reentry in Douglas County is sort of the primary referral source. I would like to hear any other resource or any other services or sources for referrals that have maybe become common, even if they don't make up a large amount. I'm just curious where else those might be coming from. And then my other question is, I'm curious if you all, or maybe reentry has tracked information about referrals made that didn't result in them becoming a participant of the program. I'm just curious sort of what the, I suppose I'm curious if that tells us something about the frequency of referrals. And there's a variety of reasons that I'm sure a referral can't be accepted. Either you're full and at capacity, it's determined that it's not a good fit at that time through whatever interview process, but I didn't see any of that really noted in this report. So maybe in future analysis, I'm curious to try and understand a little bit more about frequency of the referrals and what maybe if lack of capacity is a common factor and a reason that we have to say no, or that, like what's the percentage or average percentage of people referred that are successfully getting into the program?
Well, I think, and I'll, let Wu or Dustin, if you have anything to offer. What I know though, first about just who's working with reentry, and I don't want to put any pressure on her, but I know that I see Captain Room is is listening in on us. So Captain Room, if you have anything to offer, feel free to raise your hand and we'll move you in, but no pressure. Just the folks that that are willing to work with reentry in the first place. That's a unique population. So it really has filtered. It's a filtering effect that who's working with reentry in the first place, and then who gets to AHH. But I don't know, like being in the jail, interacting with folks during the programs. I don't know, Dustin, you have any insights you want to offer? Yeah, sorry, you got to go back and get all your steps in today.
Yeah, so I have a very basic understanding of who can work with reentry, but I know one of the biggest factors is you have to have a predetermined out date. So you can't say I'm going to court and I think I'm getting out. Those people will be given our flyer and we would still come and meet with them, but the direct referrals from reentry, like I said, have to be involved in the reentry program. They have to have a specific out date for them to even be available to work with reentry. As far as other recommendations, I mean, at this point, it's starting to become word of mouth. Because I'm in the jail so often, even people that aren't with reentry, they're like, hey, let me meet with you, let me talk with you. And so that's becoming more common. DECA, drug court, MIR, any other recovery, like the TRC Center, we're getting more calls from them. As we're becoming a bigger name within the community, we do a feed for for the houseless community on Saturdays. They're starting to kind of say, okay, well, how can I get involved? And it's getting bigger and bigger. And yeah, the main reason for not being able to take someone is capacity. I've been turning down people for the past 3 months because there's nowhere to put anyone.
And early on, we had conversations with Wu before Dustin was in his role, was, yes, in particular, priority is to take referrals from the jail staff. That's our priority. If you have capacity, and I'm going to move Captain Room. She raised her hand. She's a champ. So Captain Room, anytime you want to unmute and offer any comments, go for it. But our priority is that we have capacity for referrals from the jail. And with, as Dustin said, if they've got those release dates, they can time that out a little more. And they're very mindful of the requirements and restrictions that we have on the houses, because we cannot have more, we're not supposed to have more than 8 people. And we benefit from the footprint that Artists Helping the Homeless has in the metropolitan area, because there are times that our folks are staying on a couch in Kansas City while they're waiting for a spot in one of our community beds. And the spillover effect of AHH, Dustin talked about the community meal provision. They are an institution now in this community. They're trusted. They were a part of the unhoused medical clinic that we had a couple weeks ago, out engaging with folks, trying to get folks to come to the clinic and engage in care. So the spillover effect from our $300 and something thousand dollars that contract we have is, I think it's the real effect is really quadrupling at this point. Captain Room, if you want to unmute and offer any comments about perspectives from the sheriff's office, the jail, go for it.
Unfortunately, I just started working with reentry, so I have very little information I can share. The one thing I do know is they have to be sentenced, so finish with court and have that out date, and then reentry can start working with them to help them figure out what their next steps are. But that's really all that I can offer.
Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And, Dustin, I think I appreciate you so exactly what I was trying to kind of draw out. One, that there are that it's possible for people to self-refer, and to like that I just, as a service provider in the community, the name has become increasingly known and an option that people are thinking about. And so I just wanted to spell out that it's not exclusively a reentry referral program, even though that is predominantly what makes up. But I also just wanted to highlight the fact that I know capacity is an issue, and that I can only assume that the number of referrals that you have to say no to because of capacity is ever increasing for a lot of circumstances. One of them just being that you are so much more engaged in the community and known by folks. So I just wanted to really highlight that fact and put a point on it, that it is, and for future, years analysis, I would be curious and hopeful to see that sort of as clear as it can be, just the difference between the capacity that we have to the growing need, and where is the gap still? How is that gap changing over time? Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Commissioner Reed. I was trying to figure out how to ask sort of that same question: is there a way to keep data on the number of referrals and then the number of referrals who, are residents and those who are not? One of the things that's nice about the data we get from the TRC is we can tell the number of people who come to the TRC and then what happens from there. And I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out is, it seems like once they're the data is showing that once they are at for at least 30 days, an artist helping the homeless home, then that has a big impact. But how big of an impact is that on our population that needs those services? Of course, at the jail, because that's what we're focused on, but also out in the community as well. And, the data doesn't give me quite that sense yet of how big of an impact and what's that, what's sort of the cost. And it's hard to talk about cost because I really appreciate the qualitative data, I think it is something important for us to think about as we think about expanding is, what is the demand out there for these types of services? And then, and how often are people, I'm really interested in that 30 days and non-30 days. There's something going on there. And I want to make sure that if we're not at capacity, and I'm sure you are, I just want to understand more about it. How are there are people out there who are not getting the service because you're at capacity, and yet there are people who are using the service and then it's actually increasing. The outcomes are not as good. I think that's what I understood from the data. So of course we want to hit our success rate higher on the number of people who hit 30 days. So I don't know if I'm making a ton of sense, but Matt, I see you're shaking your head like you understand where I'm going there. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I'll just say, I'm also very interested in that referral data you're saying. I didn't have that, and so I can't crunch those numbers, and I don't know if we're collecting it, but if we aren't, we can start. And, that'll get at the impact that you're talking about a little bit more. So I wrote some notes down, and hopefully the next iteration of this will incorporate some of that.
Yeah, I think what just stood out for me when I read through the report is that it just left me with a lot of questions about the unmet need, right? Like we're meeting some previously unmet needs, right? Progress is evident. I think I agree with you that I'm not surprised by the numbers. I'm not surprised that the data tells the story that it does of the people that you have seen go through the programs and the personal experience you've had. But it still leaves me pretty curious about how to define and try and qualify what that unmet need is, and maybe suss out some reasons for that, right? There's some obvious reasons on the surface, but I think there are always others, right? Like trying to understand better about the folks who didn't stay very long, or it wasn't a fit, right? Trying to identify some of those reasons in addition to why referrals weren't possible to accept. So I just want to say while you're up here, Dustin, I really appreciate everything that you've shared and those stories earlier. Those are really important to me, and they're important for our community to hear about what the positive ripple effect and that domino fall can look like based on different avenues and opportunities that are presented to some folks. And so I just really appreciate you spelling that out and giving a few really good examples of the impact that it has beyond the individual, and that that's what makes it's a community. There are lots of community problems and there's lots of community solutions. And I think we have to talk about that multiple people are impacted by each avenue or possible outcome that we talk about. So thank you for that.
Well, I have you here. I'd just like to say how many positive things I hear about AHH in the community from all areas. I've yet to hear any negative things whatsoever. It's just a fabulous program. It's touching lives. It's really catching people where they need to be caught. Really appreciate the program and the work that you do and the heart that you bring to it. So we're really glad to have that program here in Douglas County and for us to get to be a part of it as one of the funders. I echo kind of what my other commissioners had said about kind of wanting to understand the scope of the need and the scope of the need beyond just men also. So we've started to have some conversations about some other homes. So I think we will hopefully talk more about not just AHH, but kind of where it fits in the rest of the ecosystem of the need, since it's not going to fit for everyone. It's a fabulous fit for the folks that work there, but what are the other programs that are needed and who can provide those? So I think we'll have a lot more conversations, a lot more work to do, but we're just really glad to have you on board and doing what you're doing.
This is a public agenda item, and all of our agenda items get opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone here at the courthouse who'd like to provide public comment? Anyone online, Jill?
Nope.
Okay. Well, this is an information item only. I think we've heaped some praise on Artists Helping the Homeless, and I want to just add to it. They're my neighbor. They're one of the homes is right around the corner. I see their vans in my neighborhood all the time, and I think supporting the funding we provided for Artists Helping the Homeless was one of the first things I did when I was on the commission, when I came on the commission, and we heard from neighbors that there were concerns about these supportive housing units opening up in communities. And I think that's a natural, understandable response. But I think what's so exciting to hear is, 5 years later, to hear positive things in the community, to have positive data to show, none of my neighbors have had any complaints that and I might kick myself for saying that when I get home, but I do think that speaks to Artists Helping the Homeless and the work that they do. It's not only important for the residents that you have, but for the community on the whole. And so thank you for that. And I think we have a lot to celebrate in the data that's here. We still have some questions that are being raised. And I think we're interested in how we can meet the needs that are out there. So Karwu and Dustin and Matt, thank you so much for your work on this and the many others who contributed to the data. I'm just really excited that this is the way that we're looking at the services that we're providing, with a real data-informed mindset. So thank you for that.
Commissioners, I wanted to also just note real quickly that I think, Dustin growing in his role and really being a leader and participating in a lot of work groups. He shows up to a lot of meetings. He contributes to a lot of meetings, but I think a lot of that, I've got to thank Karwu for stepping back a little bit. We want this program to be sustained. We want it to be, but it needs to also be its own branch in a lot of ways. And it's hard for Karwu to let go. He's always there with us, but he's really let Dustin lead, and that's huge. And I think that speaks volumes of Karwu. He is the foundation of this program. He's the face of it in a lot of ways, but he's let Dustin really become the local face of the organization. And I just want to give him a shout out.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to appointments. Commissioner, did I miss something?
No, I was just remembering
Oh, yes, oh, okay. We'll move on to the appointment. We have Fadra, am I saying that? Phaedra, thank you. Mitchell, who we got some communication just today about a BZA candidate, didn't know. We got a bio, didn't know if we were willing to make an appointment this evening or wanted more time, commissioners.
I've gotten to interact with Phaedra. They had a land use application that came before the commission some months ago, and I had met with her out at the property about that. I was excited to hear that she was interested. I am happy and ready to make that appointment, but I'm happy to hear from others. Nope, okay. I move that we appoint Phaedra Mitchell to the BZA for, trying to see what the period of time is. I don't know, is it 2 or 3 years?
Commissioner Willie, I'll have to review that.
Well, my motion is for the length of time that the position is available.
Yes.
Yeah, I had it in an email and I can't find it right now.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Commissioners, I don't think we have any other appointments at this time. We'll move on to Commissioner Administrator Miscellaneous. Jill, do you want to go over the memo?
Yes, commissioners, you've got the manager's memo, highlights the upcoming meeting for the Douglas County. We've got drug court graduation on Friday, and we've got the KAC conferences happening next week in Wichita. Community Health Plan Food Security meeting, there's a flyer in your packet there. And then Planning Commission Annual Orientation coming up next Friday. Some fun information items. The Midco Award to the broadband was awarded the Broadband Acceleration Grant that we committed some matching funds to, so that's exciting. And they'll be asking for that match a little bit, probably early next year when they submit their grant report to Midco. And then you see some information here about some treatment that Public Works will be doing at Lone Star Lake. And then there's a really great quarterly update from Gabby Sprague on third quarter update on the Housing and Human Services Program and how those rent and utility assistance funds are being administered and utilized, and some of those trends. And if you ever have questions on any of that, Gabby's happy to help. And then you can see a couple other items there on board packets. Upcoming work sessions, we'll be looking at those various tax incentive programs managed by the Tax and Land Records team at next week's work session. JLE renovation update, LDCFM update on the CIP, station location and wildfire index on the 20th, and then we will not meet the 27th. And you can see some of your appointments there.
I believe we may need to add one noticed time, is that both Commissioner Reed and I are hoping to get to the screening of the movie Common Ground. It's about regenerative agriculture at Liberty Hall tonight, so you can add that. And Commissioner Kelly, will you be there also? I didn't
No, I
ask.
haven't. I have
Okay.
another event.
Nothing else from me.
Okay. I don't have anything either. We are adjourned.